Welcome to the Parks and Rec Board here. Has everybody had a chance to go over the minutes? Make a motion that we accept the minutes.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Next, do we want to go into the conversation about the dogs? The proposal, the ordinance of 2024-01, requirement dogs on leash at Skunk Hollow Park and trails. Any discussion there, or anyone have anything to say? Comments? If not,
Mr. Chairman, I'll say a few words if that's okay.
Sure.
So I just wanted to let the board members know that in your packets, I did provide you with a copy of the list of the incident reports that had been provided to the police department over the last several years, along with the succinct summaries, of course, of those, as well as the complaints that have been made to the township by email, by phone call over the years. I know that that's something that we talked about at quite a few meetings. If you're looking for more information on citations that have been issued, I know the police department is looking into those to see since July when we did start enforcement of Ordinance 2024-01. Those would be prepared and organized for the Board of Commissioners. So just to kind of announce a little bit on the timeline too, so the expectation today was that here in the February meeting, we'd start the discussion and reevaluation of Ordinance 2024-01 in an effort to hopefully make a recommendation and a weigh-in to that to the Board of Commissioners next month at the March meeting. And then that will also go to the commissioners along with item A on the agenda tonight, which was the proposed resolution with regards to the dogs in parks that you all made at the January meeting. So I anticipate the commissioners will review both of those items together, so they have one dog-related topic night that we would anticipate probably at this point. I think at the earliest would be their second meeting in March, but probably most likely will happen in April. And then that will be an ordinance review. So just to recap, an ordinance review is something that then comes up for introduction, then goes 10 days for advertisement, and then would end up being approved at the next and subsequent meeting. So once we define that schedule, we'll be able to communicate that with everyone. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. But I did want to let you know that I did provide some of that information to you just to help in your review. And so just as a reminder, tonight is just evaluation. And that's actually in the ordinance that the commissioners had drafted in Ordinance 2024-01, that we would come back within a year. I think when this board made the proposed resolution, the thought was, okay, we'll come back in 2 years and evaluate it. The commissioners had changed that when they passed the ordinance and had indicated we would come back in 1 year, evaluate it, see how things are going. So at this point, they'll be waiting on a recommendation from all of you.
Tammy, first, thanks for providing this summary for us, which we haven't had before. I did have questions regarding, though. Is this something that the public is able to see as well?
It certainly is. I can post it on the website. I did want to give a chance tonight for the Parks Board to look at it, give me some thoughts and questions that I can certainly take back to the Superintendent of Police and or the Township Manager. That way, if there's any refinement or anything is needed, we've had some opportunity to do that.
I know that you've had requests for, obviously transparency with this information as these decisions are made, and it does help having it, and I think for the general public as well to have access to it. But I also was curious, this only pertains to the Willows, Skunk Hollow, and Sawmill Park?
So sometimes when an incident report is made with the police department, it might be referenced as one or the other. Like the three have been interchangeable in terms of location from time to time. So it does include the entire property. I think most are really indicated Willow, Skunk Hollow. And then with regards to any of the department complaints that are made, I think all of them are really Skunk Hollows, Willows, because I would have gotten all of them.
The secondary question would be, is there an additional list or a tally for those outside of those said parks, meaning the park system as a whole? Is there a list of incidents that's also available?
We have a lot of Hartford, especially, because there are a lot of them. There have been some at Ditmar. There have been some at Clemacrone. So I don't have it compiled like this in a spreadsheet, but that is something that we can evaluate doing if that's something that's necessary. So at this point, we're going to be meeting with the Board of Commissioners, the chair and the president and the vice president, to see what exactly they're going to be looking for their meeting. In addition, we'll be working with Commissioner Riley, who's our liaison to the Parks and Rec Board, and we'll provide the information that they're looking for to help them make a decision ultimately.
Thank you. I would make a personal ask and a recommendation that if we can get the information about the other parks as well, because it does put it in context, and particularly for the public, then they know the situations in each park and how these judgments may or may not be made. So, thank you.
One thing I can tell you, though, because I've seen all those and obviously get the phone calls and the emails, they do not compare to the volume, of course, that we see at Skunk Hollow and the Willows and have really over the last 10 to 15 years.
Tammy, a quick clarification. Do we need to do anything more with the proposed resolution to maintain current permissions on where dogs are permitted, or is that just on here just so it's joined with the ordinance 2401?
Correct.
Okay, so there's nothing more we need to do
No
with
expectations on anything else, no.
Okay.
I wanted it on there so that folks did know that it would be coming up at an upcoming Board of Commissioners meeting where it would be discussed and potentially voted on.
Okay, thanks.
Do we have a sense as to how many individuals are represented by this? Like, are there people that are making 2 or 3 or more of these complaints? I could see that coming up as a question.
I can certainly anticipate that. I mean, I can think of one individual who has made a couple, because again, I see the data, I see the names and all the information. I'd have to look a little bit more closely at it, but there might be 1 or 2 that have made a couple. But that's a good question, to see if there's any, is it all unique or is it repeat information, repeat reports? So we can definitely take a closer look at that. That's good information.
I'm just looking over here. Any other questions from the board or anything?
I have one other question about this. Is there a reason that that people chose to either report these to the police versus Parks and Rec complaint? Is it a nature of the incident that happened, or is it personal preference?
In my assessment, it's personal preference. I think for some of the more severe incidences where there's actual bite, where there's actual attack, those seem to be the majority went to the police department because it was a 911 call, so there wasn't a question about where the call would go. However, there are some that maybe walk a fine line where they maybe did want to call 911, so they do report it to our department. But I would say for anything more severe, it appears to me that most of those all went to a 911 call that then led to a dispatch by an officer that came out and made a police incident report. Or in some cases, folks will reach out to me, and in just about every case where there is something that walks that line and it's not just sort of a more rudimentary complaint, I will direct them to the police department to also turn around and make a report.
Thank you.
And I just had another quick question also. It does seem as though the rate or incidence has diminished somewhat. Is that an accurate assessment of reports?
In terms of what timeline?
2024?
Well, 2024 seems to be pretty balanced between,
Okay. I just don't know if there is a change or not. You feel it's consistent? Had the leash policy have any effect whatsoever in the incidents?
you know, I would have to take a closer look at the data and like put it on a chart, which I can do. I can put it on a graph and look at it a little bit more closely. But it seems like there's still an uptick in 2024 when you take a look at least the police incident reports that are made as well as department complaints.
And the next would be seasonal versus, obviously the leash is only effect on weekends. I'm just curious, we're looking for data did that policy have any real effect? So.
I mean, I can speak for myself. I went and visited Skunk Hollow about 2 weeks ago on a Sunday during the leashed hours and saw, I think one of the things we're going to have to deal with in addition to these complaints and also just our general sense of things is that, quite frankly, the regulations aren't being followed. I can tell you I saw that Sunday 2 weeks ago, it was during the leashed hours, I saw 10 dogs, 9 of which were off leash during the leashing hours. I also went and did a visit during leashed hours in mid-November, and 3 of the 5 dogs that I came across were not leashed. None of these dogs were aggressive, only one barked, but that was a little thing. It wasn't menacing in any means, but no matter what we decide, and this is true for the ordinance that we dealt with for the last several months, but also this ordinance reality is there's little, we're up against the challenge of enforcement, but also just people following the rules. So I just thought that as we review this and make any recommendations, we sort of keep that in the back of our minds. I mean, Skunk Hollow is every time I go, I'm reminded of how much of an asset it is in Radnor to be that sort of isolated, but still be in your own township here, and stone's throw from the city. And I think it's important that it's an asset that as many people in the township feel comfortable using. While I know it's unique and provides a unique landscape for dog owners, especially those who want to walk it off leash, it's such a nice area. I just think it's just important that we try to have it as accessible and usable and enjoyed by as many people as possible. So as we try to sort of thread that needle, whether that means we adjust the hours or not, I don't know, but that's sort of been my experience with it.
You can come up to the podium. You just need to speak into the microphone and just let the board know your name and your address.
Okay. I'm Megan Patterson at 241 Lenore. I go to Skunk Hollow every morning with my dog, as many of us do. I have not seen at the 3 places where people park the hours posted. I know that it's on the website. But I think that some people who don't realize, hey, this is the place where we need to go to find that information for the specific hours, because it's not posted.
There should be a sign at all the entrances. There should be a sign at the entrance right at the Willows proper parking lot, of course, right before you go onto the trail where the kiosk is. There's signage that's there, that's posted. And then there's also signage if you're down in the Skunk Hollow parking lot before you go down where you get to where the bridge is that crosses the creek. And then there's another one over by Sawmill where you enter the park. So unless they've been removed, they should be there.
I haven't seen any hours that say anything that specifies Saturday times and Sunday times.
They were posted there.
Okay.
So we can double check and make sure that, again, I mean, we had some trouble with signage being removed early on, but it wasn't those signs.
Okay.
But we can certainly get out there and take a look at those tomorrow and see if they are still there. They should be there. I mean, I know the times I've been at the park, they're there.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments, or how about from any other from the audience? This is an interesting list.
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend that, this is a lot to digest in terms of incidents. And I imagine that since it's been made public, that we'll be making our recommendation in March, that unless there's other questions or ideas, that we sort of be prepared to decide what we want to do in terms of recommendation in March, during our March meeting.
Okay.
I do have a question, and maybe you can help me. Is the compost lot parking area being used more and more? It feels like it's because the gate is consistently open, whereas in the past felt like it was hit or miss, right?
There's a lot of people that have been parking there.
Yeah,
That's easier access to.
then Sawmill Park.
Skunk Hollow.
Yeah.
Skunk Hollow doesn't, or Sawmill doesn't have as much parking. You can put your car along the edge there, but in that compost pile.
Right.
Area, there's a lot more space to park cars. So that is being used a lot more.
It feels like it's
I've noticed a lot more people parking.
it's a better lot. The only problem is the in and out. Yeah. I don't believe there's signage for the trail that goes towards the mulch pit. I think the signage may be at the trail that goes towards the metal bridge.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, because we try to keep people out of the area where the
Yeah.
compost is, so the goal is not to really send people in that direction.
Yeah.
Can you come up with the mic, just so people catch it from home? That's okay. Otherwise, they don't hear you.
No, we generally park where the plows are lined up there, and then go down the hill, not up towards the compost area. There's a lot of trucks in and out of
Right,
there, of
exactly. I mean,
course.
that's a place we try to keep folks out of.
Yeah,
Like,
I
a lot
don't-
of times the gate is closed further up, not the gate off of Darby Paoli, but the gate to go back where the mulch actually is.
Yeah, no, when you come in off Darby Paoli, come down, make the left, and then go down the hill there towards the bridge.
Right, where the trash can is.
Yes, and the bags and
Yep.
yeah.
And that's where the sign is posted as well.
Okay, I've never noticed it, so.
It is brown.
Okay.
It does blend a little bit.
Okay.
But we'll check, because you just never know.
Okay.
Somebody's got a great collection out there, maybe.
They might. All right, thank you.
Okay, do we want to move on? Any other comments? Nothing. Do we want to do the reports for Parks and Rec?
I could jump into Odoricio now, in case
Odoricio,
anyone is
I'm sorry.
that.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. Yeah.
All right. Just in a minute here, I'm going to queue up a presentation that I have planned for tonight. And I'm joined here with TJ McIntyre, who is with Greenhouse Design Group. You guys may have remembered him. He did some work on Fenimore as well years ago with Gilmore and Associates, a long time ago. We talked about that subject for now going on 9 years, I believe. But he's here tonight on behalf of Odoricio, and was our design firm, of course, to be selected as the architect to put some of renderings together that we're going to show you. But before we get to that, I just wanted to kind of kick it off a little bit and step through some of the background, because I know we have some new board members that haven't been privy to the discussions on Odorriceo. Believe it or not, we were here 3 years ago where it appeared on our agenda for the first time. So it just goes to show you how lightning fast 3 years can zip by. I know we had a town hall meeting in 2021 at the RTCA, and we started talking about improvements at Odorriceo, and then in February of 2022, it actually landed on our agenda so that we could officially start talking about the improvements with a goal to understand, input information from the community, what they're looking for, and it kicked off with a series of meetings that went on for quite a few years. So the goal tonight is to just kind of backtrack a little bit, provide that framework, and then also note that where we're going to be heading is to continue to review the concept plan, continue to generate some input over the next few months. I'd like to have a very dedicated meeting at the RTCA again over on Highland Avenue so we can get the residents to come out. Hopefully, since it might be a little bit more walkable for them, get a little bit of a better showing than what we might have tonight. Although we hope as a result of tonight's meeting, folks realize they can call, email, and continue to provide feedback. So as we go through this, obviously we'll sort of be the byproduct, the plan will be the byproduct of the community input, but really the goal is if we could start to identify the core goals and objectives of the plan by the summer, then we can start to work with TJ and his team and generate an order of magnitude cost. That way we can start having conversations with the Board of Commissioners late summer, early September, which is when we'll be, believe it or not, starting to really identify the 2026 capital budget, which it just felt like yesterday when we identified the 2025. So with that, I wanted to kind of step through some information on the park. This is a great park. I actually visited it in my personal life. My son's played baseball here a lot, so I've been the visiting team that has came to the park and has gotten a chance to experience it from that perspective. And I could tell you, even though I know we have a lot of critics of the park because we know we haven't had improvements for 50, 60 years of having the park, people who come from out of town really see it as a beautiful space. With rolling hills, the wooded backdrop, it's really unique. I know folks don't always have kind things to say about the restroom and some of the other facilities, but overall there's really a positive feel when people come to this park as outsiders. And I got to experience that on in my personal world. So as you know, 25 acres of the park, it's a very huge space. There's a big wooded area to the back, which I know we've had a lot of conversations about over the years. Park originally named after Rocco A. Odorriceo Park in 1967. He was the former 6th Ward Commissioner, as you know now is Jake Abel. And then the baseball field, of course, was renamed to Ralph DeMeo Field because of all his efforts that he made and strides with volunteering for over 50 years in Little League and Legion Baseball and making great contributions. So as we started discussing the park over the last, amazingly, 3 years, we quickly identified that the woods area to the back of the park, although we've had some proposals for bike trails and pedestrian trails, was an area that we know needs continued evaluation, but overall did not seem like it was desirable for any type of development. So when we came in and we did the survey to the park, we really concentrated on all the areas that really don't include that side of the park. And then the lower half here that runs along the residents here that live along Atlee. So really what we're talking about are improvements essentially in this yellow area that I had defined. And then the area that I'm showing you here in red, still at play. Again, I don't want to dispel anything from happening in this space, but I'm just basing on the conversations that we had. I know we had a strong desire to preserve the wooded area. We know that there's some stormwater runoff actually coming from the woods because of the grades that come out of the woods and then down onto the residents' properties that live along Atlee. So we know there's some things we can do in that area that might lead to more buffers, stormwater management, that sort of type of park enhancements. And then overall, there might be also a result of improvements that we're making throughout the park that might lead to stormwater management things we need to place in those areas that are, of course, down over the hillsides from the top of the park because of the dramatic slope that we know that comes down towards Atlee from the top part of the park. This is just a recap of our meetings. We had a lot of special meetings. We had a park walk meeting a couple years ago. We had a community input survey, which I'll get to in a little bit. I actually provided you with copies of the survey as well, the feedback and information to that. You received it about a year ago, but I just wanted to kind of give it so the new board members have it, so it's in your packets as well. We did a simple Google survey where folks had about 9 months to provide input and information. Then we had, of course, a big roundtable meeting last year, a year in November of 2023, so a year and a half ago almost, where we actually put people at tables at the RTCA. We had some high-level aerials, and we had sort of a little bit of a color forms approach to where we wanted to place things, like the pavilion, restrooms, playground, and it was just sort of a open forum to generate ideas and input and information, which we thought was very valuable. And that essentially led us to a list of goals and objectives for the project, which we then in turn passed along to TJ and his team to start to put together into the concept plan, recognizing that this is still an open process, of course, for continued feedback. Ultimately, as I pointed out, we do want to get this project to the Board of Commissioners and review the conceptual plan that could potentially be adapted into a final conceptual plan that would go to, an actual engineering scope and budgeted so that we can get the work done, hopefully within the next couple years. It would be great if we could see this through before the end of the year, but there's a lot of pieces that would have to fit into the puzzle to make that happen. So just a reminder, the Parks and Recreation Board back in 2022 had a recommendation to utilize the remaining funds in the Park Impact Fund that's based on the land development ordinance that we passed back in 2014, I believe, to generate funding for park and capital improvements based on developments taking place across town. So the goal was to earmark remaining funds after a project had taken place at Enki to put those towards Odoriceo as a main goal and objective of that fund. And then we ended up getting a grant from Delco Greenways, which was in the amount of $100,000. So that's helping actually to pay for the planning. So that has enabled us to pay all the costs for Greenhouse to do their work, as well as the land boundary survey and the topographical survey that we had done as well to help him be able to start his work. So far we haven't touched any funds in the Park Impact Fund, but that doesn't mean down the road that we might have to, basically, depending on how far we go with design, final design, and then could potentially even utilize some of it for engineering or for construction once we would maybe get to that and, kind of complement different areas where we might be able to fund the project. As I had mentioned, there's a lot of things going on in this park. There's a lot of things we haven't touched in many, many years. The playground was built in 1996. We know it's aging. The bathroom, I think, was the original that was there years ago. So a lot of work to be done, a lot of ideas. When we started coming up with goals and objectives, we had a full plate, a huge plate of different goals and objectives for the park and the project, everything ranging from the aging infrastructure to the eroding hillsides, to stormwater management needs. There's definitely a vital need to stabilize the hillside. If you go down to the baseball field and you look up, you'll be able to see the tree roots and the erosion that's taking place, where there's considerable exposure. There's a lot of water that continually runs down behind home plate and comes into the baseball field. So there's significant changes in the upper portion of the park that are going to have to happen with stormwater regrading and engineering to help with that. So that's definitely a given, and arguably something that would have to happen regardless of this project. But the goal was to take a comprehensive approach, as we've done with Clemmer-Crone, as we did with Fenimore Woods. We kind of did it in part with Warren, Philippone, Beau Connor. So now it's really Odoricio's turn to get that full look, that master plan look at how can we do a full plate of improvements and kind of come in and renovate this park, which, you know, really hasn't had any TLC in a very long time. So these are just some pictures of the existing conditions. I'm not going to dwell on them too much, but a lot of the improvements will be to these amenities. You can see here, this is the hillside where you're on the third base side. You can see the dramatic erosion that's coming down where the staircase is being undercut. You can see the tree root exposure here. That's going to have to be considered in the long term in terms of, you know, making sure we mitigate things like this from happening in the future. So just to highlight just really quick on the trees, we learned through Fenimore, in the planning for Fenimore, a lot about trees. So the goal with this project will not be to remove trees. That definitely, we know, moving forward is one of our primary goals. And with this plan, and in complementary with other efforts that are being made by the Shade Tree Committee, as well as other organizations, we do want to focus on trees in this park and take that comprehensive look. So it's not just about the infrastructure improvement, but it's also about, okay, you know, how can we continue to make it a great green space for generations to come? And that'll be really important as we move forward, as well as helping with all of those stormwater issues that I had mentioned. So this is just showing some of the high-level areas, again, where the stormwater issues are, especially down in the, you know, more southern part of the park. So I just want to kind of go through here. As our conversations unfolded publicly, we talked a lot about other parts of the project that, you know, kind of were part of the project, but not part of the project. So one of them is the address of the park. So the address of the park right now is 418 Fairview Avenue. You Google it, you map it, it takes you through the neighborhoods, through Highland Avenue. It's taking buses there, cars there, all kinds of people that are coming as the visiting teams for the school district teams that play there, the Little League teams that play there, the Legion teams that play there, of course, the older Little League ages. And the goal is to get that address changed to a West Wayne Avenue address where we have the majority of the parking, of course. We know that there's still an ownership piece that we're working through with Radnor School District. What we've researched with the county and our solicitors come back with is that there is still a dual ownership that is there where they own a portion, we own a portion. So that's something that we just want to make sure we nail down in terms of, you know, taking the further steps. So those are concurrent, you know, to what's going on. One of the big things we also heard was egress from Church Street coming to Fairview Drive was that folks wanted to see a one-way in, one-way out approach. I know we brought it before the Staff Traffic Committee in September and November of 2022. However, we didn't have any residents show to support it, and we needed the residents to back it to help us move it through. So it just ended up being kind of punted to the next agenda and the next agenda, and then we didn't really hear anything further on that. So as you'll see later when we show you the plan, that can help the parking at Fairview near the basketball court because it can become a little bit of a bigger parking lot. Well, it can take additional parking because we can do slanted parking that will allow us to increase the capacity. But overall, that was a desire that the residents had told us, so we were trying to carry that through, saw that there's a great benefit to it. It also can help with parking. Right now, there's just one side that allows you to park basically perpendicular to the park. So with the angled parking, we can get more parking, and we can accommodate Second Baptist, we can accommodate Radnor, the Township Civic Association. When we have the Unity in our community event, we know we're always hurting for parking, so having additional parking in that lot, you know, could be, you know, a great benefit in addition to giving the residents that one-way in, one-way out flow that they were looking for. So those were just some of the other things that, you know, we were looking for. Connectivity to the neighborhoods is critical. Being able to ensure that there are safe sidewalks to get into the park, both from Fairview, Highland and Fairview, as well as West Wayne. So making sure that that's fixed as well. Again, may not necessarily be funded in this project, but something we definitely want to try and tie in if we can. So that's just the high-level view on that side of the park. So you can see right now, you have cars that can park perpendicular, cars that can park parallel here, but if we're able to create the one-way in, one-way out access, we'll be able to create an angled parking situation. With TJ can show you a little bit more in detail here in a bit, how we can change pretty dramatically the amount of cars that we can get into that particular lot. So the survey, I'm not going to go into too much detail here. I just wanted to highlight, we had a great survey that was out. As I mentioned, it was in circulation for a pretty long time. Overwhelmingly, there was a large amount of people who wanted to see improvements happen to the park. You have all the data at your fingertips there that was provided, where people could input exactly what they were looking for, but just high level, some of the existing features that they wanted to see improved: the bathroom comfort station, the playground area and children's play space, the baseball fields, multi-purpose field, basketball court, which we know we recently renovated, which turned out really well for the park, the wooded space and the natural spaces with preservation. So some of that's cut off, but you have the full lines of the information and the data that I gave you. Seating, park benches, picnic tables, landscaping, tree planting, fixing the parking lots, fixing the park access, the egress and ingress, which another thing we had talked about was, of course, off of West Wayne Avenue, fixing that egress at that side of the park also, and then just overall park navigation and circumnavigation through the park with ADA pathways. And then new features folks wanted to see, there's a list here. A lot of them really had to do with replacement features, but you could see there's some things like we heard about having a water feature, like a spray ground, water feature that was able to be sort of like a splash pad type of atmosphere. We talked about that a little bit. You won't see that incorporated into this plan, but by the same token, where you'll see the playground area still can become that. So some of those placeholders can still evolve. So things like the playground can become a nature-based playground. It can become a commercial, inclusive-based playground. It can become a splash pad if that's really what people want to see. But not something you'll see directly on the plan. We heard about skateboard facilities, dog walking park. So you see the list that goes on there. And we can continue to talk about those as the project evolves. So again, just some of the things you'll see on the plan with regards to trees. There are a considerable amount of tree plantings that TJ and his team put into the park. I think there's over 90 so far. That's fluid. My recommendation will be is let's figure out what we want to do in terms of the actual amenities, and then let's come in and backfill. So some of the places where you'll see trees, that doesn't mean that's where they're going to actually land. And in fact, we'll make that a comprehensive part of the project where we will work with our township arborist, we'll work with the shade tree committee, we will work with the residents to find out what they want to see as well, especially where we line up near some of the properties. So parking, again, TJ's going to get into that and some of the changes that you'll see there in terms of the organization and the structure of the parking lots. And then some of the other amenities we heard a lot about was the amphitheater and the stage for the culture, arts, and music that folks want to see more of at this park and then also be part of in terms of coming out and performing music at the park, and also some other creative things that I know TJ had came up with the dugouts and a seating section. So at this point, I'm going to kick it over to him, and I'm going to let him start to talk more about the plan and the detail, and then some of the ideas that we had in terms of the amenities, like the pavilion, like the seating that I was talking about, so he'll be able to show you some of those images.
Okay. So obviously the goal was to take all the data that Tammy had provided us, all the survey data, all the wants and needs, and kind of synthesize that into something that makes sense, people can move through, is accessible, and provides the township and its residents what they need. So this is the plan that we initially came up with. Again, as Tammy said, that doesn't mean it's the final plan. So if we start up towards the Highland parking lot, we basically wanted to take simplified ways of addressing the issue of parking, because like Tammy's talking about, the existing parking lot that's there, while it technically does park a certain amount of spaces, if that parking lot were completely full with parallel spaces and normal spaces, the normal spaces would never be able to back out, right? It's like a giant game of Tetris. It's impossible for people to move once the entire lot is full, so it just doesn't make sense. So it's realistically, it was just a patch of asphalt. So we decided with Tammy, well, in the past, like we've done, making parking lots one way tends to really solve a lot of issues, especially around events like baseball or, you know, if a concert in the park or things like that. It tends to simplify things because there's a lot less confusion of people going this way or that way or using this entrance and that entrance. It's, this is the entrance, this is the exit, right? Everybody's just going one way. It simplifies things and makes it a lot easier. So on your right, in the upper right, is the entrance to the parking lot. Everything comes in. It's basically 45 angled parking. It allows us to actually gain a few spaces here and address ADA accessibility. So each parking lot, both parking lots, have minimum two ADA spaces. That's more than what's required by code. It's just, we want to provide at least two on both sides of the park. We decided to basically move people through the park in a way that was easy to navigate if you did not come here for baseball, right? So it can be a continuous loop in and out that connects back into both sides of the neighborhood. So you'll see there's a trail that kind of runs along that upper parking lot that connects into the basketball area. It's lined with trees right now. That connects. Does it actually show up? No. I was going to say, is there a pointer? There you go. Okay. So this trail kind of connects into the basketball area, and the intention was to connect everything back into the right-of-way and again connect it into Church and into the neighborhood over here. But kind of have this come down and essentially have everything be a stop along the way. So in other words, you could walk from one neighborhood to the other. You don't have to stop. You don't have to necessarily walk off and go somewhere else if you wanted to take your kids to the playground, for example, right? So you're going to walk through the area that's the playground. There's a plaza on one side that overlooks the baseball field, and the playground's just simply on the other side of it. So it's basically just a giant spine that makes its way through the park. You'll see there's a pavilion area. This is addressing the existing pavilion area, right? So this is kind of similar what Tammy and I had originally talked about many years ago at Fenimore, with a seating pavilion that has, you know, multiple restrooms in it, and it's in the same exact location as the existing one. Why? For obvious reasons, right? You don't have to run new sewer. We don't have to run new electric. It's already there. Yes.
Seating pavilion, what does that mean?
Just picnic tables underneath the covered roof,
okay.
basically.
All right, okay.
Not any kind of, you know, structured seat or anything like that.
Okay.
There is, you know, small areas that connect in and out of the pavilion and the playground area. Again, that's stuff that's kind of up for determination still. The playground area can be determined, typically when you design playgrounds, it's a 5 to 12 area and a 2 to 5 area. It's typically not merged. It typically separate kids based on their age groups. That allows that. It doesn't have to be that, right? Those spaces can double as other things as we, you know, continue to develop this. This central walkway or spine or trail makes its way around to the side and connects into the right-of-way off of Wayne. We also left an area in the middle. So basically, again, you're going to walk through the space on either side of a memorial area where we can relocate a few of the boulders that are there. Again, not moving them very far, because if any of you have ever been there, they're massive. They are quite large. And making our way down to the second parking lot, which again actually increases the parking. again is one way, and again utilizes the existing driveways. We're trying not to get into involving a whole lot with PennDOT here, because when we start to open PennDOT stuff, we just have to do a highway occupancy permit, we have to do ADA ramps to cross things. We're trying to keep it a little more simplified while still allowing things to move at a better flow and less congestion than it does now. The baseball field was one thing of, a major focus of it, so to speak. The bench areas that are there now are obviously at the bottom of the hill, which means they tend to suffer from runoff, right? They tend to have the side of the hill tends to just wash out at the bottom of them. This is the existing area, right? This is, I believe, 11 or 12 feet of grade change from top to bottom. If water is coming down there, it's typically going to rip through it. So one of the things that Tammy and I decided to talk about was, what if we kind of built the dugouts into the side of the hill? Essentially building a 6-foot wall with a monosloped roof over it and directing water away from the dugouts and away from the baseball field. On the other side, we did the same exact thing, but allowed for stadium seating. The stadium seating is obviously optional. It's basically a 3-tiered concrete amphitheater with an ADA accessible platform up top that just overlooks the baseball field. That way there is no, no one is, cast aside from watching the game if they're in a wheelchair or if they, have accessibility issues. The last remaining piece was this kind of amphitheater seating and bandshell stage. So what we decided to do after walking the site a few times was build the actual stage into the side of the hill. So if we built it into the side of the hill and placed a very simple amphitheater in front of what is now the soccer fields, it allows for people to essentially sit there if they're watching soccer, or to be able to utilize it to watch whatever is happening at the bandshell. Due to all of this running down here, we've kind of designated this area at the bottom for stormwater management. We don't know what it entails yet. We won't know what it entails until we get into more of a actual design and engineering of this. A lot of it will be dictated by the state. DEP is going to tell us what we need to do, unfortunately. But we have creative ways of mitigating that and deciding what we want to do. But that is the area, obviously, we've decided for, because it is downhill. It's just, instead of putting things in pipes, we'd rather just let gravity take it. There's no sense digging up the entire park and destroying what's there to trench pipes everywhere, instead of just creatively pushing it with swales or whatever we might do, or like we've done in the past with dry streams and things like that. So that is the park.
If I could just point out one
Sure.
thing. So just one item I wanted to point out about the bottom of the hill there, especially where we have the residents that are along Atlee in that corner. If you've ever walked back there, there's an open space area now that we cut at the bottom of the hillside. So I know that's something that I'm working with the Public Works Department to see, let's stop cutting that. And then I want to work with our township arborist to see if there's a way we can come up with a plan to replant that. We're always looking for places to put trees. I know that a lot of the area where the driveway back is, it's hard because it was a quarry, right? It was Quarry Park. So there's a lot of boulders and there's a lot of rock that's in the ground there. But towards the back could be an option for a no-mow zone. It could be an option for a tree planting plan. Or a combination of both, or a meadow. So I know we're having a lot of conversations about those topics, park system wide, and that area at the bottom offers a great opportunity to do that. And then even the further you come up in this area also offers all of that, all the way along the residents there, just to create that buffer. So that's just an area that we're looking for. And then it also like TJ's saying, you know, it does allow us to be able to have a stormwater BMP in that area as well, because there is going to be, as a result of the calculations of the impervious surfaces that we're going to be replacing, we're going to have to make stormwater management improvements. So even though those were never made when the park was originally constructed, because I don't think those codes existed then, we will have to make that and follow the township ordinances for stormwater, and we'll be working really closely, not only with TJ and his skill set and his team, but also our township engineer as well on that. As we know, Steve Norsini is very integral to the stormwater management planning across the township, so he will be right in the trenches with this project as we do that. So things that you're seeing here, like, again, there's a lot of, it's just very optional. This is a starting point. I don't want to, this is not going to go to construction tomorrow, because I know that's the first thing that's going to happen. Tomorrow I'm going to read it on the patch, or I'm going to see it like on social media. It's going to be, oh my gosh, did you know they're building stadium seating at Odorosio Park? And that's why I wanted to make sure this is a concept, because I know we had this happen with a lot of our other projects, and believe it or not, like, the phones will start ringing tomorrow. It's already Friday. It's, you know, I think it's already a weekend of a full moon too, so they'll be coming. But I just want to make sure folks know, like, there's a lot to do here. There's a lot of ideas we still want to gain. You know, we want to hear from residents. Hopefully they tune in, or they're watching the replay, because we know we've had some great attendance out there at the Radnor Civic Association when we've had these meetings, so we want to know what they think about it. Things can be different sizes, different shapes. We still have some leverage to move things. What I will say, though, is removing the asphalt parking lot, I'll call it, that's up above the stair set, really helps in a lot of different ways, and really with the hillside erosion, I think that's huge, because then that gives us the ability to regrade and re-engineer the top portion of the park, and hopefully, you know, through the engineering geniuses, pitch water in the direction that's not towards the ball field, and hopefully fix a lot of that.
Right, so you're kind of seeing, you can see like the natural topography of this all runs down to the baseball field. The goal is to basically basically we're gonna cut it into two halves, right? This whole portion becomes its own drainage area, so to speak. So instead of sending it the way it is now, which is it all sheds down the hills, is we basically flip it on itself and turn it like a roadway crown, essentially. So there'll be a ridge along it that basically splits it and sends it back the other way. So we want to manage the stormwater that's up there, and keep it up there, instead of sending it down and creating more problems, because that's eventually what will happen. And that's why the trees, you know, that's why their roots are blown out and things like that, because you're not going to stop water. You can't. So this is...
So
Oh,
I have a question.
sure.
Just because this is my park and I know it intimately. And at the bottom where you speak of the stormwater is also where the log cabin used to be. Is there still like the
fireplace?
chimney? And so has there been a idea? I'm hoping that the idea is not to take it down.
We're not going to touch it, but
No, I mean, so it's a question for the scouts, if there's something they want to do or rejuvenate there. I will tell you that the residents that live along there will be very adverse to any activity in that side of the park, so we're just going to want to be mindful of that. Not that, you know, we don't want to get into like this group gets what they want, but this one doesn't. Like, we want to do the right thing, and maybe there's a way that once there's a buffer created in there, that can be renovated in some way. But TJ and I were just out there a week ago. The fireplace is still there. The pad is still there. It needs cleaned up a bit, but by the same token, it could be rejuvenated into something. I think it was an old scout cabin that had been there previously that had burned down. I think it just predated me before I started here in '99. So we would be willing to hear what folks would like to see there. It could be part of this project, or it could be something ancillary to the project.
And then my next question has to do with the parking lot that you speak of at the top near the basketball courts. I just need to understand that a little bit because that happens to be my actual block. So I need to understand how the traffic is flowing because obviously I don't want a lot of traffic, you know what I mean, directed in that way.
So, so this is your in, and this is your out. This red line that you can kind of see up here, that's the extent of the existing parking lot. So it is almost identical, except we're actually adding green space and increasing the parking spaces.
And making Fairview a mandatory exit.
Correct.
So I just want to point out that that was what the residents spoke up that they wanted. They wanted to see that one-way flow. So if that's something they don't want, we need to sort of sort out that situation and understand that a little bit more. And I think some of it had to do with safety. Cars trying to pass one another on a narrow road. If you're on Church Street, there's a lot of cars parked along Church Street for the apartments. And then when cars try to pass each other, it's very difficult. I think TJ brought up a good point. When there's events taking place, people aren't really sure where to go, and people are coming from both directions. So it could make it just a safer ingress, egress all around for the neighborhood, especially if we're going to talk about sidewalks and trying to get more people to the park who will hopefully be coming, to the park because there's increased, new features. But something that still needs further conversation.
The basketball court is still, it doesn't seem to be referenced on this map, but is that still on this footprint?
It's there.
It is. It's just the only thing that you can actually see from it is the
Yeah, it's right there.
the extent of the fence.
The fence, yeah. Just, I had a question about the dugout structures. They, are they roof structures?
They are. I think they're in here, right, Tammy? So we did kind of, and we can go back to this. Kind of just a little quick, engineering study of this, of like, what would this look like? How would it work? Because it is a little hard to imagine.
Yeah. How do you keep people off the roof? And
That is always the biggest problem with this. So on the other side, where we have the stadium seating, for example, Tammy and I talked about, it's like, well, based on ADA code and things like that, even if you can't get down there accessibility-wise, we still need a 5-foot buffer with a fence in front of it. So this would most likely get the same thing, which you can see based on the little sketch of how basically all the rainwater that hits the roof of the dugout is running back to a drain at the base of it. That is going to most likely be filled with river jack anyway. So that would most likely need a fence in front of it, just so we're not inviting people to pick up stone. We're not inviting little kids to kind of pick up stone, just for safety reasons anyway. So
it's fairly set back too from the field itself. Maybe some others could speak to that, but it just feels like they're set back a lot further than I would think they would be.
we can.
And also the materials with that optional stadium, what type of materials would be?
As far as the stadium seating?
Yeah.
Again, that's all kind of stuff we'd figure out and work through once we get to actual design and engineering. Typically, when you do stadium seating, they're most likely structural concrete. Is typically how they're done, with tiebacks.
All right.
Right, and the dugout walls are usually CMU. Again, that depends on what you want to do. I mean, you could always veneer it with stone. You can paint it. You can, we could do a million things with it to give it a million different appearances. It's really dependent on, the aesthetic that people really want and the amount of money we want to spend on, that specific item is what it comes down to.
I'd say the overview looks really good. The spine it makes sense. The traffic flows work better. It has all the things I think that was discussed previously. It's just now just getting the nuts and bolts to the final details.
Exactly.
I have a question, if it's possible, and maybe go back to the basics. I'm a new member, and first of all, I am totally blown away by the time, the effort, and the thoroughness of this. This is like unbelievable as far as I'm concerned. But I want to go back, and I don't know whether this is appropriate, but back to money. And I gather this is going to be an ongoing issue, but I gather we have $100,000 to pay for Gilmore and design work. Is that?
I'm not.
And then,
I
oh
used-
yeah,
I
I'm
used-
sorry.
He was with Gilmore.
I-
So, yeah, so greenhouse, but yes.
Yeah.
So we have a $100,000 grant that we had gotten from the Delco Greenways, okay? So that is paying for planning. So essentially that is affording the concept plan development. And then as well as we had did a land boundary survey, right?
Okay.
And then a topographical survey, which we fulfilled all the portions of that except for the wooded area. We didn't do the woods and then to the east.
Yeah.
Just because I thought if we're not, like, we can come back and do it later, but I thought if we're not going to develop that space, let's wait to survey it because we could save the money. So we
Right.
saved a bit of money just by, maybe parlaying that, or not doing that portion if we're not gonna do anything there. Now, with that being said, we may on the horizon have to come back and do that. But that would be funded as part of it. So everything else at that point, we know is an unknown cost, right? So
Well,
until
do we have any, that's the other thing, is do we have any leftover money? There was something about leftover money from something. and I'm not-
we don't have any leftover money. We do have park impact fund money.
Okay.
So the park impact fund is a fund that generates money from land development. So when certain land developments that are going on throughout town that you see, we have a portion of the money that gets put into there for
Is
capital
there
funds for parks and
any
parks improvements.
parameters on what is there or not?
What do you mean parameters? It's authorized by the Board of Commissioners.
But how much?
Right now,
Yes.
it has about $400,000 in it.
Okay.
Okay,
that
so
could
this
be.
board had passed a recommendation to the commissioners to say, anything that we don't spend on the current planning that we have going on, okay, or anything, that is left over to fund, will come out of that fund. Now, of course, at the end of the day, the commissioners will have to authorize that.
Yes.
So whatever balance is in there, it could go towards this project. It's
It could.
possible that it could.
And that
The
would be a
commissioners would have to
commissioner's decision.
discuss, or they would have to evaluate alternative funding. So we know that this is a park project that would be ripe for grants. That we think there's a lot of connectivity that it's demonstrating. It's demonstrating stormwater management and runoff control. There's environmental education that we could, kind of couch into it. So it certainly would be a grant-ripe project. And we
Situation,
know that the Delco Greenway's already invested into it. And then there's obviously opportunities for a bond. The township has we have a lot of park capital funding that is needed across the park system. But this definitely has been a project that's been in the pipeline for a long time.
I gather,
In
yeah.
fact, when we borrowed money in 2016, originally this one was in there. It was removed from it, unfortunately, because that amount that we borrowed was whittled down to a lower amount. So other parks ended up, reaping
Yeah.
the benefits of the improvements at that point. But, I think there's a good, solid avenue to get to where we need to with this. And then it's taking a comprehensive approach, because since I came into my role in 2010, and even before that, the comfort station was in the capital plan. The playground was in the capital plan. The parking lots were. And it was very, like, à la carte. But to take a comprehensive approach and try and dive in and get it done would definitely be something that's a better way to approach the project. That way we're not piecemealing it, and, the comfort station gets done this year, and then, next year it's maybe something else, or in a few years, and then ultimately, you don't have what these other parks have generated at that point, like Clemacrone, like Fenimore.
Is Ward 6, I don't know who the ward leader is, but has he been helpful and maybe be a leader in this thing? Because I think, I'm fully supportive. I think the board will be supportive. And I just think we need some more help. And the Ward 6 leader, whoever that might be, I don't even know, but could be very helpful with the Board of Commissioners.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Yep, and so will all of you to recommend the project, because I know the Board of Commissioners thinks very highly of the recommendations coming from this board.
I personally would like to see this be more graphic. Like is there a way to? I'm sure that this is very detailed. I'm just not an architect, and just before,
Well,
I
ultimately,
say, yeah.
ultimately he
I'd
would
like
prepare.
To see, there were some pictures that you flipped through that had pictures.
Right. Well, ultimately, a plan, like a detailed plan rendering, would be put together. But we wanted to kind of get an idea of what everybody wants to see first before he goes and puts that together.
It would look like
And then
actually the one that you have of mine from our website in the beginning.
Okay, so if we were to back up to that.
Yeah, I mean, just as an example, like that is.
Tammy, I think that you've pretty well described it. This is a conceptual, and this is for ideas. I've already placed a call to you and supporting all of this, but that's not the way it works. So I think that for sake of the process here, you're approaching it right. I mean, these are all considerations. I mean, I want all this stuff. But when we get down to nitty-gritty, I think we're going to have to compromise, put it that way.
Right, so, and just to Sharifa, to your point though, so this is an example from TJ's website at Greenhouse that just shows, more of a drawing. And we saw a lot of these with Fenimore as well and Clemacrone, but we didn't want to task him to do that just yet, because again, then everybody thinks we're building it tomorrow, and that's, we just don't want to send the wrong message. And then Clemacrone literally had 7, 8 iterations. Yeah. And every time we do that, it costs more money and costs more money and costs more money. So the goal here is to sort of okay, let's get an idea conceptually, what do we want to see? And then obviously TJ will go back and he'll put, all his great computer software together that does all that and generates that, and we'll get a pretty picture that, we can actually show folks. I know it's tough, to sometimes conceptualize it, but I think if we get sort of the programming of it down, an idea like, for example, do we want to see dugouts that have seating over them on the third base line? Do we want to see amphitheater seating? So just to kind of tie into that, so we did have some examples teed up here. So these are some examples of the pavilions. So the one in the upper right should look very familiar. That's Emlyn Tennell Park. Very small. It doesn't have its picnic tables under it in this particular picture because it was early on in the construction, but right now there's 3 picnic tables that fit under there. So you could see the one in the upper left here probably has, 6 or so picnic tables. Like, we can adjust and scale. I don't think we're going to want something that is the size of Fenimore necessarily, because that's going to take up a lot of room. It's going to be right behind the residents along the street. I know in talking with Howard a little bit, there was interested in seeing a little bit of an extended concrete pad where people can grill. That's something that's going to have to, generate a little bit more conversation. But these are some examples of what that might look like. Here's another one. And then just moving on to the amphitheater seating to kind of bring that together a little bit more. The goal is to make it green, so you could see a couple of examples here of not only what the amphitheater seating would look like, but also the stages as well, that you have to envision, of course, built into the hillside. It wouldn't necessarily be a standalone, as TJ had explained. It would be, wedged kind of in the hillside there. And these are things we can go out to the park this spring and early summer and walk and look at. In fact, when Emlyn Tennell's Comfort Station was built, we did that. We had a field trip, and we had a lot of people who came out and attended, and we looked at a lot of different locations relative to members in the community who wanted to be mindful of their properties and noise and light and all those things. So that still could be on the horizon here on the short term. to help us figure that out. I know one of the questions that came up here is if this is built into the hillside, what about the sledders? Because I know that looks like a great obstacle right there to launch over. I don't want to put the idea in
That's where
anybody's
they'll go
head,
first.
but I am a snowboarder in my other life. But it's definitely something we're going to want to be mindful of in terms of how would we organize that? Would it be appropriate? Should it be smaller? Does it need fencing around it? Do we even want it? Is it necessary? It does offer an opportunity to see the band shell, to see the soccer field, to see the baseball field. You can get, a very great, 180 view of the park to see the activities that are going on. But is it appropriate? Or is sledding a bigger priority? And obviously, safety is key, and we'd have to, strategically plan for that. But it's one of the things that we heard in the community they wanted to see, so that's why we put it in here. I don't know if we had, I guess we had just a little bit of a bigger rendering of the stage and what it could look like. Again, like if you go out on the catalog for some of these vendors like Cedar Forest and Polygon and all the vendors that sell these types of structures, I mean, there's hundreds to choose from.
And they can be customized
While
in a
you-
million different ways.
While you were back there, that last one, right there. Now, that would be,
Yes, Howard, you can perform on that stage if you want.
never happen. It'll never happen. Okay. With that against the slope there, and with that hill coming down, is there anything going to be, would that deter, or would that change the grading of that hill, of the slope where that hill is? Because where it's on the block there, like I said before, there's when it really turns icy with the snow and everything, sometimes they use that avenue right there to come down on sledding. So would that alter that at all?
I'll let you speak to that. I mean, it might jut out, the pavement
It
might.
shouldn't really,
it's
I mean,
leveled.
as far as the stage goes and everything like that, the way it is, I mean, Tammy and I walked this actual spot, actually, you slipped last week because it was too icy.
Exactly.
But no, it's actually tucked back enough that that wide area before it actually starts to slope down into the soccer field is still there.
It's kind of flat too.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
there might be like, if this is elevated, and this can be flush to the ground, like this could be built so that it's flush, and then any stormwater runoff would be calculated to go around that and designed to go around that. This could even have a gutter on it if it was needed. to
Right,
do
so,
that.
so the way this is laid out is it's essentially built into the side of the hill. So basically you could walk onto it from the upper side, and then it's a 3-foot wall on the lower side.
Okay.
If that makes
That helps
sense
out, yeah.
without any kind of visual representation of it.
Yeah, that helps out a little bit.
These, I think, are all, I don't know, can you hear me? Okay, these are all valid questions, and they're all ideas that come up, and that's really why I'm strongly suggesting we get Ward 6 leader involved, because we have a lot of people with a lot of ideas, and we need somebody to corral the cats, how about that? To corral the cats, to, get a consensus and answer these questions and get a consensus. Because, as we all know, there are a million opinions, and there will be polarization like everything else. So, whoever I should know, but Ward 6 leader, we should get him on the team.
Yeah, and so the Ward 6 commissioner is Jake Abel, and I did meet with him to go through the plan with him. So he got a first look, and Jake has been supportive all along to the project. So, we do want to enlist him and make sure he's involved and continue to do that. But I will say the work of this board has been monumental to the project. Before, Bill, you were on the board, and Sharifa and Jenna, I mean, you guys led those meetings at the RTCA. And, I mean, we had a pretty good showing. We had, 40, 50 people, I think, for some of the meetings. I think we had pizza that night, so we'll have to remember to do that again.
Was there a reason for the location of the band shell being somewhat further away from things in terms of, like, could it be closer to parking lot or the picnic area, or was that a noise concern?
So the reasoning for the band shell is, so where we set up the music now is down in this area. So you kind of come down over the slope. It's the stage for the events that we have done, most notably Odorissimo Music Night. We've had it here. So, I mean, it can go anywhere. You know, if we think it's something we want to have up in this area, I would be mindful of residents. We've always put it down here because, you know, the sound sort of casts out through the field and, you know, somewhat dissipates. And you've got the hillside here to baffle the sound so that it's not coming, you know, right into the backs of the residents here. You've got enough buffer and distance here where, you know, it helps create that. But again, these
Model
locations are
people
not set.
looking Up?
Pardon me?
They're looking up at the.
They would sit at, the people here were on the hillside looking down at when we've had the band play
Yeah,
down
but in
here.
its current location, where would the audience be?
So the thought is that in the hillside, you would have the amphitheater seating that was desired, because when we met out on the site and when we met at the RTCA, like that was something that was desired by the community, was to have this hillside type seating, and you're still able to see into this area. So if you were to sit here or sit up above, you would have a view. If you go out there and you look at it, it does create a sight line. There is a sight line that's there, even though it might not look like it from the.
It just looks
Mm-hmm.
an unusual location to me.
Yep.
But-
But again, nothing's in stone. So that's where if you have ideas, you know, TJ could go back and even, you know, leave what's there, but add it someplace else. If you have ideas to where things may be able to, you know, be moved or have an option to be removed. And I mean, again, this is just a color forms approach right now to just sort of like, you know, drop things wherever we think might work, unless we think for sure something wouldn't work in a given location, given slopes and whatnot.
No, I mean, we can grade anything to work any way we want, right? That's the point of grading, is we can manipulate the land in any way we want. I mean, realistically, sure, you could tuck a small amphitheater here if you wanted to, that curves around the actual walkway, just follows the actual path of it. But again, that's things of, like Tammy's alluding to, of, you know, sensitivity to neighbors and things like that, that,
Yeah, that would be my concern
Right.
there. I just, it just, between the curved amphitheater seating and then this on a hill, it just goes against my logic to,
Well, some of it also too is that we're still going to have the ability for the vehicles to kind of drive down and through this area. So one of the things with the band area is there's always a lot to set up. There's, you know, music equipment, sound equipment, light equipment, if there's ever, you know, towards evening type show. So we definitely want to have, I think it's needed to have some accessibility to get to it, and we'll still be able to have the ability to drive off the parking lot here and down into the park, because I know our Public Works folks do drive through that area. I think they come in over on this side also.
yeah.
So just another thing just to be mindful, and this is definitely a layout that we would work with the Public Works Department. I did have a chance to review this with our Public Works Director a week ago, and that'll be a continued dialogue as well with them, so that it works for their needs, in addition to where, you know, the community might be looking for certain things. There's also, you know, there's a back portion of the park here too, on the other side of the basketball court, that offers opportunity if we wanted to. I don't know that I would really want to kind of put it way back there, but again, you know, we could walk the park and we could look and see if there's different ideas, if there's places where, you know, we think might be an option now that we might want to consider. We could do that as well. You know, the great thing with spring upcoming, folks will be looking to get outside and walk and look a little bit, and we can, you know, take one of the design plans out with us and mark it up and come up with some different ideas if we think there's some other things that might, you know, we might want to consider.
And for those with limitations, want to know, how would they access this if you had somebody that was unable to navigate that?
For the amphitheater?
Yeah.
It's definitely a consideration.
Yeah, I mean,
Just thinking of your audience, I just can't, you know.
realistically with any of that, so that's kind of like the idea with the stadium seating was, right, there's that ADA overlook at the top of it.
Yeah, that's a
So-
good thing.
With an amphitheater, you kind of are forced to do the same thing unless you want to, in this case, due to the severity of the grade, just constant switchbacks of ramps, which gets intrusive, expensive.
Very
and
complicated.
It just, it ends up looking like an eyesore.
I think that needs some work, that area, so. Also, my last question, just trees. How many trees are lost? How many trees are gained at this point?
There's one tree that's lost.
Well, I thought we saved it. It was over here where the stadium seating was. I thought we saved it. I think we went
Oh,
to
no,
zero.
you're
Yeah, we
right.
went to
You
zero,
took that
because
stadium
zero
seating
is the directive, okay? We know zero is the directive. So, but this plan you're seeing allows for 90 to be
Yeah,
planted.
It looks like about 100 trees, so.
Yes, and that, again, that's fluid, too. But
Was
no
there-
trees are coming down.
Was there a reason for taking away the the benches along the third baseline at the top of the hill? I mean, the park benches.
I don't think we were taking them away.
No, so we didn't
We-
really get into like.
Not
site
that level of
plans.
detail.
Okay.
They could be
like that.
relocated somewhere if we wanted them to, or they could be
So like.
moved.
I started to lay some of them out, like you can see, like,
Right.
like these are benches here, like,
Yeah.
you can see like these are benches, but that's just to kind of differentiate that that's not just a random concrete pad.
Right, right.
We would obviously, like, if this is a passive walking trail,
Mhm.
it'll be filled with, you know, obviously benches, trash cans, things of that nature.
I was just thinking more along the lines of people of the third base line team, kind of like they are now.
Yeah,
Like
and
there's
that's definitely something to consider, especially to overlook.
And then what about, I know one, I don't want to call it complaint, but observation is that right now where the restrooms are is also used as a storage shed, and it's a pretty good hike to get the liner and the tools down to the actual field, and then even more difficult getting them back up the hill. Is that sort of like a storage shed part of this plan, or is it something that could be built into the dugouts or behind the home plate?
So Legion and Little League have requested to actually put a structure. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but they made a request to put a structure somewhere in this area, like a shed, like a storage shed, in order to be able to accommodate those things. And even though I've had preliminary conversations with Little League just about this plan, they are aware of it. They're, part of the engagement process. As you know, we have a dedicated e-newsletter that goes out to a group of folks that are engaged on the project. All the Little League folks are involved in that too. Those are all conversations to be had as part of this, because I do recognize that that is an issue. And, if they have to go back and forth and, they're kind of coming through the playground and the walkway, it's not easy. But I know that they had proposed a structure, actually sometime last year. I don't know what the status of that is, so that was the goal for them, to have their equipment closer to where it needs to be. But getting in,
I hate to say that, but I have another question. Do we have an idea of the usage of the baseball field versus high school, senior league, Legion, and Little, or whatever, whoever uses it? Which gets to a deeper question of ownership and all that, and I don't think we need an answer now, but I'd love to see the usage of what it is, and who's using it.
so we're the gateway to all of that.
Yep,
I will attribute it to Natalie Masosha in our
Okay.
department, because she oversees the scheduling
okay.
for all the parks, be it picnics, field usage,
Yeah.
you name it. So we have all that data, because we are the receiving.
Keeper.
We are the keeper, yes. We're the keeper of the schedule, and we are the gateway to the scheduling.
Right.
So, currently we're talking about Legion baseball. We're talking about the older ages, 14 and up baseball players within Radnor Wayne Little League. There's the school baseball teams that use it for the middle school.
Right.
We've got the school soccer teams for the middle school
okay, yeah, I
that use
forgot
it.
about
There's
that,
St.
yes.
Catherine's that also has
Oh,
different
yes,
years
yeah.
of use it. Plus, we have a ton of rentals when we can backfill the time that it's not being used, I can tell you that Odoricio's usage is significant in terms of baseball and soccer, which are the two primary sports that are played there. And it's home to like one of two 90-foot diamonds that we have that appeal to that upper age group.
Okay.
So the only other one is North Wayne, which really is kind of smaller and not as desired, of course, as it is here, other than, of course, the school district fields.
Would you say, yeah, this is school district versus independent, I guess, in baseball on the field, that's all just baseball. What, could you guesstimate a percentage of school versus independent?
Versus like Little League and Legion?
Yes. Yeah,
I'd have to
maybe.
go look at the composition of the
Yeah,
hours.
okay. I'm asking for a deeper question, but I think it would be valuable to know the usage.
I know where you're going with it.
Okay. I don't want.
I'll let you
I'm
make
not
that
very-
ask.
I'm not very subtle, and I apologize, but that's.
No, that's okay. I think I know where you're going with
okay,
that.
yeah.
But yes, they do use it significantly in the spring.
Yeah, yeah.
One question, and I wasn't a part of the planning, but is there any, like, I know you have the amphitheater, like year-round type of meeting space, or like a space that can be like closed in, that can be used like around this time of the year, or just like a little, I don't know, just something more than just when the weather is nice, is my point.
Well, I mean, it can be a consideration, but you know, if there's a building that needs to have HVAC, then at that point, I mean, that hasn't come up in any of the conversations, but if we're talking about now a building and a structure on the site, that's a considerable discussion. I mean, that gets into a lot of, I would say, more input, community input. I would want to hear more on that. So there are picnic shelters like these that are all closed in. There's some really nice ones. In fact, you know, that, offer that opportunity, but if it's going to be used year-round, you're going to want to have heat. So you're going to have some level of forced air. So now you're getting into, heavy mechanical, to be able to power basically a building. And then, we would have to look at how does that impact parking? How does that impact, accessibility, all of those things. Anything's open for discussion. It's just that's the first time that has actually come up. But I could see that definitely being something that would add considerable costs. But if we're just trying to come up with what people would use, I guess my only question would be, is that the RTCA is right next door. Is there a need for an indoor facility at Odoricio Park?
But isn't that like a more of a cost? Like you have to pay to use the RTCA?
Well, if we had an indoor structure here, I would think we would charge to use it as well for the community.
Yeah.
Unless we had a meeting or something there, we had an event of some sort. So it would be a lot like our covered pavilions that we have, at Fenimore, which will make its return, of course, within the next year. And then Clemacrone, I mean, we do charge to use those. So it may be something that's similar.
Yeah, because there's also a charge to use it just for the general barbecue that we've had, like a few years, where we've had X amount of people, and there has been a charge to rent it for our barbecues out there.
Am I on here? I just have two quick things. I think it's great that we are thinking so much about accessibility for the pavilion and the stadium seating. I think that it might be worth also considering that for the playground for the kids as well. Oh, that's great.
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. The other thing is I was curious as to how much the responses from the survey influenced what went into the design.
Yeah, I mean, I think that because the survey really focused a lot on the bathrooms being improved, the pavilions being improved, that was definitely a key piece we know we wanted to focus on. The playgrounds and the playground area, play space, we'll say, it wasn't like we were gonna make that go away. We wanted to enhance that, bring it up to code, bring it up to today's standards, make sure it's inclusive. The great news is commercial playgrounds today are almost all inclusive, so they're built a lot different today, and then we can, of course, add pieces and components that make it even more inclusive, especially having TJ on the team here will be a tremendous asset to that. Basketball was still, important within the survey, obviously the multi-purpose field and all of that with the soccer, baseball, no one wanted to see that go away. The other things were like tree plantings, nature preservation, preservation of the woodlands and the rolling hills and the green areas, enhancing those, maintaining those. Those were things that really came to the surface. I mean, some of the things I think that were called out in there, like pickleball courts and sport courts, didn't make their way onto this plan because they do add impervious surface to the park, and I know that impervious surface additions are something we are trying to get away from. Plus, I'll be honest, I'm not really seeing the need for that right now because
They're all over.
we have it at Clemacrone. I know they use the shared nets, but Warren Philippone and the Beau Connor Park pickleball court don't necessarily seem to be having an oversaturation. Plus, we have indoor year-round at Radnor Activity Center, so we're not seeing that. I mean, I would probably lean more towards if we're really interested in pickleball, which I know came up in this survey. And people could have filled out the survey 10 times. That was one of the downsides of a Google survey. So that's another thing to keep in mind. But I'd be more of an advocate of looking to get the school district to convert some of their current tennis courts and make those pickleball courts before we start adding additional ones. The skateboard space, like a small skateboard area came up. I think that was pretty high, if I remember correctly, on the survey, and something that I know some of the community kids on Highland Avenue I knew do skateboard because I see them over here a lot. Might be something we could, craft a small area in that lawn if we wanted to. Again, I wanted to let that sort of be something we continue in terms of dialogue. And if we do have a meeting at the RTCA or we get, a full room of folks that really want to, dig in and talk Odoriceo, those things can come back to the table and be on the plan.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful. I was curious as to if people could submit more than one response, and also,
Unfortunately, yes.
I guess going into this conversation, I was thinking that we were prioritizing the interests and needs of the immediate neighborhood, but then hearing how much usage is baseball related, how much of their needs would be included as well, and did we capture that audience?
Yeah, so I met with Radnor Wayne Little League president, as well as Mark Jordan, so Tom McWilliams and Mark Jordan with Radnor Wayne Little League and Legion Baseball, respectively. They actually came out to the park walk the day that we were out there, so we got a lot of input with them. I met with them subsequently as well to kind of talk through their needs, and their needs did have to do with things like storage at the field, dugouts, which are huge, which at the same time, I also let them know that, we'd be interested in seeing them maybe contribute, towards that, because it is making a pretty big improvement, a costly improvement to the park that benefits them, as well as having the additional seating. So those were some of the things they were interested in. We didn't get into power and water too much. I'm not sure how much those are a need at the park. I know that, there's always desire for scoreboards and things like that. So, but I feel overall, I feel like I heard from them. The school district didn't participate, so we don't really have any input from them, but I think they overall would benefit from some of the things that we heard from Little League and, from the baseball community. And of course, if there are other things, we would still be open to hearing those. And the parking, of course, is critical, so, and trying to add parking.
This parking it reminds me of Clemacrone, which is such a easy parking lot, and there's so much visibility. It's easy to see when you're backing out, so I think that looks really fantastic.
Right, so one of the other things that came up too, I wouldn't say it was a high percentage item, but circumnavigation. So the ability to, basically start at one end of the park and go all the way around the park was something that was brought forward. But as we just talked about, with accessibility, would be difficult to achieve in this park. It would be, adding a lot of switchbacks that would have to zigzag to be able to achieve the grade, which I believe is like no greater than a 5% slope or 6% slope, to be able to make that happen, and then would be adding surface to the park. So even though my goal with this would be for any of the walkways and the parking lots to do pervious surface, porous pave, sometimes it doesn't always achieve that, and so that's really adding a lot of asphalt and/or even if you did like a crushed rubber that's porous, it's adding a lot to the park. And recognizing that then as a result of that, we have to do stormwater management, because in order to put those surfaces down, we've got to excavate, we've got to lay stone, we've got to lay a base. It's not just, slapping it down on the grass. So there's a lot that would go into that, and then therefore having to make more stormwater improvements as a result of more walkways and pathways throughout the park. It just didn't seem like that was consistent with what the residents along Atlee were looking for, and kind of went against a little bit more of the nature inspiration, tree planting, stormwater management components of the project.
We talked at one point about putting a peripheral loop. I know that came up when we met over there. Just it seems like we have that whole lower area there that you can't access other than viewing it. Wouldn't it make sense to have some type of loop that went?
Well, that's what I was just saying. Like, it's going to add. In order to achieve that, so you have a steep slope here on this side of the park. It's going to have to be a zigzag of surfacing. Again, whether it's poured rubber surfacing or porous asphalt surfacing, in order to be able to achieve the 5% slope that you need in order to make something ADA, it's going to be covered in
We couldn't
material.
label it an unimproved trail. It would be not a trail. Obviously, we have trails that aren't ADA compliant.
Sure.
But,
Could be. I will say the other thing is the neighbors down here were not supportive of it.
understand, but it's park for everyone.
Understandable, and it's still on the table.
It's just.
It's absolutely
I know
still.
people are looking for walking,
Mhm.
and we've heard comments about safe walking, and you do. It's just.
Be sure to give out your own email address there, Clark, for those neighbors down the street.
I'm not.
Yeah, I'm going to forward all those to you.
I'm just putting it out there as discussed previously. If it's not something people want, then don't do it. I'm not going to push for it.
I just want to get clarity on the lower parking lot, the parking lot right below the playground.
This one, that
Yeah, what's the plan for that again?
to remove the asphalt and to create lawn space. So this is an area that's still sort of an open bubble. We heard people would like to see community garden. Again, we heard about, skateboard area. We heard about pickleball courts. We heard about memorial and reflection space, which we were kind of hoping to do more of a memorial out here, with the utilizing the boulders and, putting up flags and things like that to have that area perhaps in this part of the park. But this is still kind of open for consideration. I know a lot of folks wanted to see more landscaping at the park, but doesn't mean that there aren't other features that could be considered for that area.
So don't judge me. Why can't it just be for parking? Because it goes from parking to here to parking to here, and it just be like a whole connected parking thing, because you already have parking here. And it's already a parking pad that people are accustomed to parking on. So why not make that like an extension of parking as opposed to like making this like a one-way? Why not just continue that? There's expansion.
Right, so part of the problem, though, is eventually this entire hillside's going to erode pretty bad. So the ability to achieve green space up here helps be able to grade and create the ability to absorb the stormwater in a more positive way. so that the water isn't continually coming down over the hillside. So having the green space up there helps us achieve that, and planting trees helps us achieve that. So that was another part of the catalyst to to basically take away that asphalt. So right now, we have asphalt in the 2 parking lot spaces that you see. So now we're taking away impervious surface.
That way you can actually see the extent of it.
Right, so it's essentially from here all the way to here, and then the driveway out. So the goal was to eliminate the impervious surface and be able to utilize it for sloping and grading in order to, like I said, basically achieve the ability to help with the stormwater management coming over the hillside.
So that, I'm sorry.
And that's just something we've heard consistently from the community. And tree groves and things like that had been something that we've heard a lot about too, even at this park. Is there something you wanted to see there, or bring the parking back there?
I just wanted to understand why there wouldn't be just a continuation of parking since it was there, and you've answered that by taking away and, dealing with the stormwater. I'm just really concerned about having one way in, one way out, and I understand that, as a community, people, want to be able to go one way or the other. But as a person who lives there, and all the traffic be directed in one direction is a concern for me.
Okay, well, that's not what we heard in our meetings at the RTCA, and that was pretty overwhelming. So that's why I even went as far to put it on the staff traffic agenda, 2 meetings, but no one showed up to help advocate for it. So then maybe it's not desired.
I think there's only, 3 of us, 4 of us on that block. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's only really 4 neighbors. 1, 2, 3, 4 houses for the most part on Fairview. So it's not like it's a whole lot of people who are impacted. So, you know what I mean?
Understandable.
For people to make a decision, it's easy because there's not a lot of us that are impacted. These streets, Church and Fairview, are just small. They're just not, it's not we don't have 10 houses or what have you. We've got, 4 structures at the most on that block. But to have that much traffic go in and out is just a little concerning because we're, we're like a one-way street that's headed nowhere, and now all of a sudden we're like a main thing, which is a bit something to swallow.
It absolutely is, and that's why this isn't in stone. So the only thing I would say is that if we take the lot back to how it is, which we could probably still do the angled parking just on one side. No, we couldn't. We'd have to go back to the perpendicular parking. Okay, so then we would just want to make up the spaces then, perhaps in the main lot. And then at that point, I would say, let's evaluate expanding the main lot versus bringing back the asphalt area we intend to remove. I would widen that in some way if we thought we could, and then if we had to go to, PennDOT highway occupancy permitting and all that, we can do that.
Right, so the other issue too, I guess, with, expanding parking on the other side too is, just the basis and the constraints of the park itself, right? We're talking about like the steep grades here. If we extend, just as an example, if we were to extend this parking lot further down, we're getting into building very, very large, expensive retaining walls to hold the parking lot up. And, yes, and the sledders. On this one?
I believe it was.
1, 2?
I thought it was 5 when I did the math, when I looked at it.
That's,
Well, the thing is that now the way people park up here is they just sort of pull parallel along here. Okay, so it's not really defined. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's not defined parking here. People pull in and they just park parallel to one another. I thought we gained 5 here as a result of that. And then over here it was, I think we gained like 15, 13?
Based on actual spaces.
Right, because they do the same thing here too. They pull parallel. So, yeah, so the net gain isn't tremendous, but it does allow us to make up for some of what we would end up losing here.
So there's not much of an impact, and it's cleaner. Traffic impact, if it's only 5 cars, it's really not that much, and it's a lot cleaner design.
You mean the way it is now? Or the way it looks here?
Versus existing. No, I know what you mean. Based on like a traffic impact study is not going to yield, is not going to yield anything. It's correct. Is what you're trying to get at.
Well, I think what Sharif was saying, though, is that whereas people who are on this side, they just come in and go out here now, right? So this is their pattern. They go in, they come out, they go in, they come out. Now, if everybody has to come through, then it's like more, I could see where you might be thinking there might be more traffic there that's coming through, because now everybody is forced to come out this way. So I think that's just the point she was trying to make. Yep, we're going to, definitely. So again, it's not off the table. I just went with what people were looking for. And when that came up, it seemed like it was something that, okay, let's try to figure out how we can benefit additional parking overall, so that then we can, basically lose the asphalt space up there. But I would probably say if we could expand this way, because it's flat here. Here, we definitely don't want to mess with the sledders. I think we're going to we'll have a meeting like we had with dogs in April of '23, and I don't think we ever want to do that again. So, yeah, so we'll stay away from this side of the park as far as that goes. Plus, we just planted a ton of new trees over there. So this area might be open to be able to make up what we could lose if we just go back to kind of leaving this the way it is.
If we want to talk about cutting trees down.
Okay, true.
So that's the other issue here is that in order to get through that, unless you use the actual access drive that's there, the access drive has trees planted around it that are not small. They are 36, 40, 48-inch caliper, they're old trees. They're not small.
So the other thing too to consider is if we did redo the asphalt that's there, we would have to reconstruct it, because right now it sits full of water, and maybe there's a way to reduce the size of it in some way, and then allow for underground stormwater management that we're trying to achieve, because we can still do that with underground piping and pushing it to the inlets and all of that if we needed to. Any other comments from the board? Okay, it's a good start. I know all along throughout this process, the one thing people wanted was a tangible, something to respond to. So that's been the goal here all along, is to give people in the community something to react to. And then that helps us go back and now, reconsider certain, alternative objectives. What I would urge the board to do is to keep looking at it. Send me your ideas, send me your thoughts, and then we're going to obviously continue the dialogue next month, even though it won't be a formal meeting at the RTCA or anything like that. We're going to keep having dialogue, and then hopefully April or May, I know I've been coordinating with Howard, have an actual meeting at the RTCA and/or combination at the park, if we think that would be helpful, to comprise our then monthly Parks Board meeting. And then keep getting input, and then we'll give TJ his marching orders on the things that we want him to go back and put together. And if we feel at that point then we want to generate renderings, something more substantial to look at, we could certainly do that. But I would just say in the meantime, it was definitely consider additional input and keep it moving.
I think the one thing that you did kind of brush up on is the, financial input of other organizations into it because they're incorporated in it, like the baseball. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I understand that baseball is really important in Oda Research. It's been very important for years. So, but again, everybody making a contribution and it not just coming from you guys.
Yep, absolutely. And we welcome it from others, too. We're not opposed to signage if somebody wants to make a big contribution.
Public participation? Yes, ma'am. Name, address, and
Jeff
Make
Curry, I'm
and
here.
make sure that you don't go over that 5 minutes, okay? With all the people here, okay?
I live on Maplewood. I'm here as a resident, not a professional. Can we go back? Do you mind if I open this back up? Okay, great.
Excuse me, sir. Could you introduce yourself again? I missed the name.
Jeff Creary. I live on Maplewood, Ward 6. I've been living in Wayne since '99 I moved here. Big fan of the park. Great plan. A lot of things going on. I'd have the wrong one. Sorry, I'm blind. So with the park and the conceptual use, there are just a couple things I would like to talk about with this. I don't want the highlighter. Okay. The amphitheater, I really would strongly suggest not doing it westward. The sunset, it's never a good combination. For the sun to set into the eyes of the participants, I would recommend moving it down and forward. As you were saying, Clark, about the stage is a little bit awkward. You would have to sit down and you have to force and look left, and that would force a lot of people to turn their necks. If you're there for an hour, turning your neck for that long would be a little uncomfortable. So if we could move it down, maybe think about putting a stage down below just so it have viewing. We need to be cognizant of Steve and his crews using this area for access, so I would not propose any trees there unless it was right along that far edge there.
Right, as I mentioned, they were just plotted, and actually I didn't even refer to TJ on the usage there where we drive on that. So that's one of those cleanup items, as is the angling.
And then West Wayne, it's not an SR, so you don't have to worry about state and PennDOT on that one, so no HOPs on that. The runoff area, I really commend the design for not having the parking up there. I think that's a great idea. That parking regularly during stormwater events, which happen more and more frequent, it takes on more water now, and you can see the evidence of it with all the debris that builds up in there. With that design, maybe if we could we reduce the lawn? There's a lot of lawn already in this park. Maybe we could use a BMP, best management practice, rain garden, and try to possibly put the path on the shortest, most direct length there, and then put the BMP uphill to really catch that runoff. It would just be nice to have less maintenance, although depending on the BMP, it could cost more to maintain it, as opposed to grass cutting. For grants, I think this park with the right grant writer would be able to find it. This is a neighborhood that needs a park. It deserves a park, and because of that position, I think, Tammy, correct me if I'm wrong, that if we could get a grant writer out there, if you know anyone, this is a great potential. Great, perfect. Let's see, the cut versus fill. This area is plagued with boulders directly underneath the earth. If there's any cut, your costs are going to go up higher than you think. I'd really be warned on that because it is a quarry. Just because when my house was built, we were pulling out stones left and right there, and this area is tough to deal with those. And then the shoehorning, I'm glad the design isn't trying to shoehorn everything into this park. This park isn't massive. It has a look, a feel that has always been a part of this neighborhood. And even though we all would love to have components in there, they have really done a good job of just getting the right ones in. And that's great. The one-way parking, I really like that idea. From a pedestrian standpoint and from children, if we could then have one way, they're going to learn to look one direction. If they're going to look one direction, they don't have to worry about the other direction when they're entering this park, because we know this is the side where the neighborhood enters that park. And children, they're the toughest to design for, and I think that design approach is really good. It's very clean. I commend the designer. You did a great job on that. And as they were saying earlier, it works. It works down at Clemacrone really well, and it's proven to be effective. But yeah, I'm just going to stop it there at comments.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate it. And also, just so none of the stormwater calculations have been taken into consideration yet, because we don't have an understanding of exactly what the surfaces are going to be. So it is likely that that lawn area would become some of that, and or other areas on the upper portion of the park, because as a result of all of the disruption that would go on. As you know, we're going to try to follow the township ordinance, and in doing so, there's a lot more than what you just see down below that would have to be taken into consideration for the stormwater management. So absolutely.
Stormwater is a barrier.
It definitely is. But like you said, like also something that helps with grants too, because, you know, they like to see that, especially big DCNR grants, which can definitely be a big help to the park.
Yes, yep. Thank you.
Thanks for your comments.
Questions?
I do have one question for you, directing to that spine. I did like that idea of moving that spine a little lower, but can the topography where it says picnic lawn, could that be from the actual path itself, terraced down to prevent that steep incline? Like basically just make it much more terracing from that path coming down?
Yeah, I mean, we could realistically pull the hillside back up, but the problem with pulling the hillside back up
Is what's
is
underneath?
trees.
Okay.
So if we start to cut against trees, we
Yeah,
start
we
to
have 1,
expose
2,
tree
3, 4
roots.
all in there.
Right.
It just, it's an unnatural bank that's there. It's so steep.
Right.
And just if you could, flatten that out a little bit, then you get a lawn that tapers down. But I get it. And who knows what's underneath there too. Yeah.
Yeah. That's always the fun part is,
Yeah. But
finding
mo-
out what's
but-
there.
And moving that forward gives you more visual to the field. And again, I get that. That's not an unreasonable thing.
No, not at all.
That picnic lawn, that's the area, that green grass between that and that bottom parking lot, right? Between the playground and,
In here.
The
Okay.
old basketball courts.
okay, now
Yeah.
where the playground is to the parking lot, is that, come over a little bit, the other way, right in there, that green space?
It is. It's all green space, and it would be a planted buffer to basically, respect the neighbor's privacy.
Okay. Okay.
You should have the existing features plan also that shows the red color
Okay.
in your packet.
Yeah, there it is. Okay. Anything else? If not. Great start for the new year, right? Tammy, would you like to? I would love Thank you.
I'll dive into my report now just to kind of keep things moving along. I know it's been a long night. So I just wanted to call your attention. Tomorrow, we have our 7th annual Bishop Richard Allen Park wreath laying ceremony over at 227 Brook Street in Bryn Mawr. If you have an opportunity and you'd like to come on over, we'll be starting at about 12:15. It's a really short ceremony, but it's really a great day to celebrate with members of the African Methodist Episcopal community and church. It's been a partnership with the AME Church of Ardmore for 7 years now. And we've been able to have the leadership of Reverend Carolyn Cabanis to lead the event. As many of you might be aware, she is now the first woman pastor of the Mother Bethel Church in Philadelphia. So, and she just was awarded that, I believe, in the fall. So it's pretty exciting. And she's just a remarkable leader and really passionate about Bishop Richard Allen, founder, of course, of the AME Church and first bishop of the AME Church. So this is really a great event. We don't get a lot of opportunities to celebrate in Bishop Richard Allen Park. So I just wanted to highlight really quick and just remind everybody, it was a park that was dedicated in 2010. It was purchased in 2006. It was a rundown property that former commissioner and the late commissioner, Lisa Paolino Adams, was very influential in the property being purchased. And we actually celebrated Lisa Paolino in 2015 with a bench dedication at the park, which is still at the park today. As some of you may be aware, I know former Parks Board members and many commissioners were in attendance. We celebrated at the park with an actual historic panel dedication to Bishop Richard Allen Park in 2023. And there's just a picture there from the event. So if you're not doing anything around noon tomorrow, maybe I'll see you at Bishop Richard Allen. We can freeze for about 45 minutes to an hour. It might be a little chilly outside, but it's definitely well worth it to gather and celebrate together with a lot of great people from the community. The other announcement I just wanted to give was on the Sweetheart Dance that we had on Friday night at the Inn at Villanova University. We want to thank them, of course, for all of their accommodations. We had almost 300 people that were in attendance. There was dancing, there was crafts and activities, a special rose ceremony at the end of the night with the parents and the children. We just want to thank everybody who was involved in making it another great event in its 14th year, which is pretty amazing. So we'll be excited to start planning, of course, again for next year. And, you know, obviously continuing to take considerations in the future on ways that we can add an additional night and be able to accommodate that heavy wait list that we know we have. Definitely something we will continue to give consideration to as we look forward. So that's really all that I had in my report, unless you had any questions about anything in there. Otherwise, I was just going to maybe just move quickly into park updates. Really, the only update that I had out of all the park items in the agenda was Fenimore. We expect to get the bids back on the stable in late March, so that'll be on the near horizon, and then we can start, putting a lot of pieces together on the park. I've been working internally with staff, as we talked about last month. We had some trees that were removed as a result of the tree risk survey. Those have all been removed throughout the park. And some of the fencing along the residence in the back part of the park, or the bottom part of the park, along Fenimore Lane near the pond were removed, and pieces of the fence were removed as well. The whole fence hasn't been removed entirely, only those pieces that are sort of in and tucked around the trees that had to come down. So we tried to leave other parts of it up just for safety purposes, as well as on the horizon, as soon as the weather breaks, we'll be replacing the fence in that area, on that portion of the park, and working, of course, with the residents continually on gated access and some of the things that they are looking for there, as well as our Eastern University residents in the corner, and then on the eastern side. I'll be in the process of preparing the pavilion for purchase and review by the Board of Commissioners within the next month to month and a half. So we'll get that moving. And then at that point, hopefully getting the bids back and understanding, exactly what that's going to cost, and hoping that it ties in with our forecasted budget. So other than that, I will be meeting with the commissioners to talk about Radnor Activity Center on the 27th. So we'll be having a conversation about that. That is an executive session meeting, so that is not a public meeting. So we'll be having some discussions about the lease and where we may be headed with regards to the RAC in terms of next steps, which at that point, we'll see where those updates take us, and I'll be able to give you those. And then the only other item that I had really was with regards to the comp plan. If you've had a chance to go through the comp plan, and there's still some time between now and the end of the month, if you could forward to me any comments you might have about it. I know I shared the link a couple of times. And then I think we're headed towards an early April presentation to the Board of Commissioners, where it will be introduced, because it would be a project that is adopted by the Board of Commissioners. So if there's any input or information you have that I can put within there, I'll be putting that together probably within the next business days, early next week, to get that all situated in terms of any comments that I know we have internally, and would welcome those from the board as well. Other than that, unless you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think that kind of does it.
I have one quick question. On the presentation to the board, and you sort of direct the conversation to us, but who actually makes the presentation to the board?
In regards to?
The comprehensive plan.
So it will, FH Studio, who are the consultants to that project, will probably be present. I know that they have made presentations already on the various segments. Those went across 3 different meetings. So what happened was the plan then went to the Planning Commission in early February. They generated a bunch of comments that went back into it. Revisions are being made. Some additional revisions would be made, if there's further input, from the community, from the Parks Board, from staff. And then ultimately, I know FH Studio will be present that night. I'm not sure if they'll make a formal presentation, but I know the staff will probably be, teeing it up for the board for their evaluation and for their vote.
Okay.
Make a motion. Any other questions? If not, make a motion to adjourn. Second. All in favor?